Okay, so I think I'll give a very brief introduction to each of them, and then we'll kick off with questions. So we'll start at the end. Ms. Paola Rusconi, she's here from Medio Credito Italiano, which is a commercial bank from Italy. And her particular experience, she's originally an engineer, but is also specialized in management and economics, someone experienced in banking and finance. And she works currently as a specialist looking at corporate investments in the green economy. And her bank specifically has been working with the EIB, we heard from earlier, as a financial intermediary to propose loans for ESCOs. So she'll be bringing experience from that. Then next to her, Mr. Miguel Sanz. So he's here representing the SUSI Energy Efficiency Fund, which is a private investment fund. This is him. The characteristic of that being that his investors are pension funds and therefore particularly conservative. So he'll be bringing some experience from that perspective. What's interesting about him is that he's basically been on both sides of the equation. He was previously director of the energy efficiency business of Honeywell here in Europe, and now obviously is looking at how to finance energy efficiency projects. So he can bring hopefully some interesting ideas from that. The next along we have Ms. Lada Strelnikova, here representing, she works at Deutsche Bank, she's a director there, and here representing the European Energy Efficiency Fund. So this is a fund consisting mainly of public funds for energy efficiency projects. It was originally created, I believe, with some of the European economic recovery money that was left over at the time and is now being strongly invested or well invested into energy efficiency projects. So welcome. And then next we have Steve Fox. So he's here representing the Investor Confidence Project, which we heard about just now, which is developing standards for project development and documentation with a view to making those projects easier to finance, more accessible to investors. Someone with over 30 years experience in energy efficiency, doing all kinds of things, including co-founding 2 energy service companies, advising governments, writing books, and he's currently still also involved in many different organizations, including the investment committee of the London Energy Efficiency Fund, for example. So again, someone with a very wide experience. We're almost at the end. Next is Mr. João de Jesus Ferreira. He's here from Portugal, so we'll be contributing some experience from there and some broader lessons. He's here representing Energia Propria, an ESCO, so specifically from the ESCO perspective. Originally an electrical engineer, also with an MBA. He's had a number of roles apart from that, including as professor, as CEO of GDF Suez in Portugal, and also working at the Portuguese Energy Agency. So again, someone with many aspects to contribute. And finally, Mr. Francis Heyen at the end, here from Belfius, a bank that's from here in Belgium, that offers loans specifically designed for smart cities and sustainable development. So he's here to give us some more of a perspective on how easy it is to develop loans and to give out money to these kinds of projects. Originally a mathematician and also studied informatics and has been involved in the marketing side of Belfius for some time, most recently in this particular field of smart cities then. Right, I don't expect you to remember exactly what everyone does, but I think that will hopefully become clearer as we get into the discussion. So without further ado, I don't have a particular order, but we'll stick perhaps to how we started, how we were in the program. So I'll start with you, Lada, perhaps. From your perspective, we'll start with a general question. How can project developers, some of the people in the room here, better convince potential funders that their project is a valuable one and deserves investment? What kind of advice would you give them?
Thank you very much. So many of you have come to see us, so that's for us also a good opportunity to meet people, to meet project authorities and also to discuss the possibility for the financing. We are is a European Energy Efficiency Fund which has been established. Just give me 2 seconds for introduction. Has been established with the European Commission money in order to accelerate the development of energy efficiency projects in the public authorities, with the public authority, and also to give potential funding also to the projects that are now probably starting or looking for funding in their communities, in their cities. The idea of the fund was actually to invest public money and then to give a basis to raise to raise also private money in order to build a real public-private partnership. So what we see ourselves and myself and my team is actually cooperating as a cooperator and a supporter of the public authorities to develop their projects and to bring them to the market to make them financeable. So we do support, we do work with ESCOs and we do work with the public authorities. So now I really encourage you to seek dialogue with myself and colleagues at the very early stage of the development of the project. So it means before you really think, okay, do you need some kind of feasibility study, or have you already done the feasibility studies and you're about to launch the ESCO tender to select if it's going to be a public-private partnership, to seek a dialogue with us in respect to discuss your projects, to see what parameters you are using, what parameters should be included from the point of the financing. So where we say at the same time we say, okay, this is actually public-private partnerships, these financing models, and probably the public authorities are not very much involved in all kind of this financial aspect, and we say this might be the job actually of ESCO to structure the projects, but at the same time we see that there's very high involvement of the cities, of the regional authorities in structuring the projects and putting also the conditions or the expectation how the project could be financed. So I wouldn't say that you are fully excluded from the process. There probably will be some other opinions of the other panelists here in the slide. But we want to see the projects that have already done preferably the feasibility studies, which there's a number of sources, financial sources also available from the European Commission to do this feasibility studies in order that we know actually at the end what are we financing. So we have our own, we had actually our own technical assistance facility. We had a possibility to review the project to see different type of developments like street lighting upgrades, also the CHP plants, which has been using or currently using the technical assistance money to prepare the project for financing. For us, as a fund, is actually important to keep that dialogue with the regional authorities and with the teams that are working for the projects, because as we see, this process is unfortunately not happening within 5 months. So we usually have project development phase until we get the project financed. It takes us up to 2 years. In that sense, there's some political changes that are happening. We will be facing, as everybody knows, for example, elections in Spain. So that we assume that there will be changes as well in the teams that are used to work with us or working with us since 2 years. So for us, it's of course an issue which you could definitely not change, but also have a possibility, which we could not influence, to stay the possibility with the same teams to work until we have financed the project.
Okay, so a few messages in there, but the two main ones I took away were, one, you would like to see as early involvement as possible, contact with the local authorities
Yes.
to talk about the financing structure. And secondly, ideally there should already be a feasibility study done at that point. It's not something that would be done later by the ESCO, etc. Okay. We can come back to both those issues. First, yes, why not? Pass to your left. Miguel, so representing SUSI, the Energy Efficiency Fund, so private investors, pension funds. I think what I would ask you is, what is because it's all about risk in particular in this case, what is the biggest source of risk for you when it comes to energy efficiency projects, and what would you say project developers can do about that?
Okay, I'm going to stand up so you see me. First, I'm going to surprise Sonia. I've never been in a panel so well prepared in advance. So she called each one of us in the previous days, had a call together, some exchange of emails, documents. That will make this panel at least a good success. So thanks very much, and also for the effort pronouncing our names. That's also something that is not small. Okay, so having said that,
Thank you.
I'm even more nervous than her. So the money we have, so we are in a specific position. Why? Because we are structured like a private investment fund. And as I say, you need to sell both sides, first to investors, and then you need to find the projects. And to sell to investors, there is a lot of money, that's true. But of course, investors don't let you money that you can invest everywhere at any condition. Of course, it's people like you and me. The money we have, which is 300 million euro, committed already, is from people like you and me. Well, maybe a bit older, because they are private pension funds, but these people which are a bit older, closer to the 60, 65, so they are a bit conservative. And we need to invest their money accordingly. So for us, as Sonia was saying, one of the key elements is solvency. And we are pretty demanding on that. And that's the way it is, because it's not our money. Something I also say is that as energy efficiency markets develops in Europe, other funds with other types of appetite will come. Because I would put my money in some of the projects I have to reject because my investors don't like it, but I would like it. Because solvency maybe is not investment grade, it's a bit below, but the project is just 5 years, and okay, but solvency is key, and there is little you can do, except throwing out all the politicians of the European Union and make them fulfill the Stability Pact and don't get such much public debt. Okay, in many places in Europe, we cannot invest. Why? Because national governments, regional governments, they are with a lot of debt. and simply they are risky. Okay, in countries like my home country, Spain, there are some municipalities that are very good, others that are not, so there is little you can do about that. But solvency is key for us, for bankability. The other is size. Size matters. Because as an investment fund, we cannot finance projects that are 100,000 euro, 300,000 euro, that's too small. We need at least 2, 3, 4 million euros, which for industrial energy efficiency, in many cases you reach that. And for municipalities, my advice would be increase the size of your projects. Bundle buildings together, street lighting, so that would make them more attractive and you would get a better rate. What happens then? That municipalities don't have this know-how to tender that. So you need to invest in that. You have Jessica, you have Elena, or you need, as a municipality, just to invest in the know-how. Because it's not easy to tender an energy savings contract. It's not, because you are not buying equipment. You are buying savings. When I used to be in Honeywell, I said, imagine I make a tender because now I hurt myself in my hand. Here in Brussels, I need 3 stitches on the hand. I need a doctor. I can tender and get the cheapest because 3 stitches, as far as it is a doctor, I don't care. But if I need a heart transplant, would I go for the cheapest one? Probably not. I want a curriculum, etc. Okay, references, blah, blah, blah. So for energy efficiency, it's the same. So you need the know-how, ask for it. There are companies that are growing. There are companies that are expanding, some of them here. I'm very glad to hear from Belgium to the Netherlands to help there because market is booming, but the municipalities don't have the know-how to tender, etc. That would be another advice. Technologies and country-wise, we don't care as far as it is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is appealing to investors. Mary Donnelly was speaking of energy efficiency. Okay, it depends. You can look at both sides, but that's a problem. It's not. It's an opportunity. I come from a country where renewables have been a complete chaos because the politicians in Spain has been so smart to make everybody pissed off. Local investors, manufacturers of PV plants, making companies go bust. Then the local utilities, Iberdrola and Endesa, they tax them. Then in the crisis with poor people, electricity prices have increased by 70% in the last 5 years. So why? To pay for the subsidies of renewables. But energy efficiency pays for itself. What's the problem we have now? Mario Draghi, and again the politicians, because when we talk to investors, we promised conditions of 2-3 years ago. But now interest rates are too low. But that's a different issue, okay? It's difficult to invest also because to be competitive sometimes with banks is very difficult. Okay, but if I have to say, tender big, ask for professional tender, and lead by example. In the US, the big four for energy efficiency in buildings, Honeywell, Siemens, Schneider, Johnson Controls, each of them have around $1 billion a year in business. And 80% of that or more goes with public bodies. Why? And you need to talk to politicians according to their incentives. There are many here. What is energy efficiency? It's bringing the savings of the future into the present. For this, you need to invest. You need 3 million euro to bring, let's say, €500,000 of savings a year. But why not bring just 6 years, but maybe 8 years? Politicians don't care about payback. Private, yes. Politicians care about budget. So in the US, you bring the money from the investment and a bit more so that the mayor can do a few things more.
Okay, thank you very much. More advice. Solvency is key, the size, the idea of bundling, something we'll come back to, I think, to maybe to talk in a bit more detail about what kinds of projects can be bundled together. Perhaps even renewables projects could be bundled with efficiency projects, for example. And finally, you want a professional tender. I think maybe we can talk about where the responsibility of the local authority starts and ends, and that of the ESCO starts and ends. And I look at you, João, since I mentioned ESCOs. To get, I think everyone has mentioned ESCOs so far. You're here representing the ESCO perspective. So I'd like to ask, what would you say local authorities or project developers can do differently to help you access funds and make your job as easy as possible, and then in turn making it as easy as possible to deliver their project in the first place?
Yeah. Thank you. In order to obtain funds, or the facility that we have to obtain funds, it not depends on the authorities. I think the authorities in this frame are not, they have no role. I don't feel it. We work with a private fund, mainly, nicer than yours, because we work with small projects, projects around 200, 500,000 euros. It's not easy to have big projects in building, for instance. It's easy to have it in public lighting or in traffic lights. But if you even a big building, if you want to make some efficiency projects in the air conditioning, in pumps, lighting, and so on, you have even if you put cogeneration, in some cases, you can have a project with an investment around 500,000 euros. More than this is difficult. So I'll say that the solvency it's a key. It's a key for the evaluation of the risk, sure. But I think that we have to put two other key words under the table. They have already mentioned in this session. Trust, it's fundamental. Trust between ESCO, customer, trust between ESCO and financial institution, and transparency between all the people who is involved in the evaluation of this kind of projects. The public authorities, in terms of help to have funds to financing this project, I don't see the role of the authorities in this case. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I hope we can get some reactions to that in a moment. So from you, perhaps, Lada, you want to give a quick response before I?
I mean, what I think is actually important is important that we do talk about solvency, about the ability of solvency of the regional authority in cities. I mean, that's really important issue that we don't get as a financier into the situation that we're not paid. But at the same time, we do see the problems that the financial authorities are facing. There are some delays in payments we see as well. But what I will say that's important as well, that we're also that kind of authorities or cities are supported in their efforts to reduce their CO2 emissions and also to support their energy efficiency projects. Because energy efficiency projects is actually reducing their cost and improving their financial stability. So I think from that point of view, we should really not say as a financier, oh, listen, this is a payment of the Italian authority. They haven't paid for 3 months, and we're not supporting them in developing their energy efficiency projects. So I think it's important that we also, we're I'll say in a position that we're looking at all kind of financial indicators of the authorities as well. So it's not the point that we're not saying the credibility of authority is not important, but at the same time, just emphasizing that we need to support also the weak municipalities in developing their energy efficiency programs.
If I understand correctly, you see more of a role for the local authority in helping us in ESCO access financing than João does.
I see the role of the, that's what I also saw in this pre-discussion with Joe, I see the role of the local authorities and the cities actually quite high in structuring the project and making it viable for the ESCO and for the financier. So this is definitely the role that these authorities play, and we have a very good people. When I started this job, I was extremely surprised what kind of qualified people you have on the regional authorities level all around Europe.
Okay, we'll come back to that. For the moment, we agree to slightly disagree. We turn to Steve Fox, who's from the Investor Confidence Project. We've already heard a lot about risk and size, and you're here to talk about standardization. Maybe one question is standardization of what exactly? And secondly, what kind of problems can that solve in your experience?
Okay, thanks, Sonia. You were kind enough to remind everybody that I've been doing this stuff 30 years, which is not always a good reminder, but it reminded me that 30 years ago when we started looking at the barriers to energy efficiency, it was a minority sport. So it's quite good to see that the numbers involved in that problem have grown. And it's not such a minority sport now. But I think there has traditionally been a problem where the energy efficiency industry has just said, the problem is lack of money. And we heard from Ralph and everybody else, and you talk to the market, there is no shortage of liquidity for well-developed projects. Doesn't matter what kind of project. I'm more concerned about energy efficiency than renewables because I think renewables has become a mass market. So standardization, when you start to unpack that problem of finance and what are the barriers, there are lots of barriers. It is a jigsaw. There's capacity building, particularly in public authorities. That's a real issue. But standardization of project development and documentation is fairly key. And it's not just us that say that. The Energy Efficiency Finance Investors Group said it very clearly. Citibank have said it, Deutsche Bank have said it, IEA have said it, many others have said lack of standardization in energy efficiency projects is a problem. When you actually look at energy financing generally, if you look at energy supply financing, if you want to finance an oil or gas field, the way you develop that project is very standardized. There are standards. You need competent geologists to do studies that follow certain standards set down by various professional bodies. And if you don't have them, you don't get money. If you have a wind farm project, 25 years ago when I did some wind farms, we made it up as we went along. And the one bank in London that wanted to do wind farms made it up as they went along. But now if you have a wind farm project and you go to the bank, they will say, where is your P90 study done by, and list a very small list of very well-known consultancy firms. And if you don't have that, you won't get finance. There's no point turning up with a P50 study done by your friend down the road. You know, it doesn't work. But energy efficiency has never done that. Every project developer does things in a different way, and that's everything from the survey, how you calculate savings, how you design and develop the project. So there's a real mismatch there between energy supply and energy efficiency. And the consequences of that are incredibly high transaction costs. You have to really put a lot of effort in to study any project and do the due diligence on any project. If you're a bank, even if you're a bank that wants to do this stuff, and there are banks who want to do this stuff, you cannot build teams around ad hoc processes. You can hire a few kind of talented individuals and do a few deals, but you can't do the scale that you need. So standardization helps people build teams, but also ultimately, you know, to get the amounts of money that we're talking about, you have to go to the debt capital markets, the 100 billion kind of numbers that were talked about earlier. And that's about bonds, and that's all about standardization. You could not sell a bond with a whole load of projects in if every project was developed and documented in a different way. It just doesn't happen. So standardization is a really important part of the jigsaw, and it's standardization of the development process and the document set, so that when an investor or a lender looks at a project, they can have confidence that it's been done in a certain way. Whereas at the moment, I guarantee if you had 10 energy efficiency experts look at this building and prepare a project, you'd have 10 completely different sets of documentation and way that everything was calculated. So that's why standardization is important.
Just one quick follow-up. How far have we actually gone to implementing this? The idea originally comes from the US. Is it already reality here in Europe?
Well, we are getting there. I think, you know, by the summer we will have early protocols which people are starting to adopt in pilot projects. So clearly the Investor Confidence Project backed by Horizon 2020 only started in January. There had been some pre-work to that, and we've been able to capitalize on some of the US work, even though, of course, we're not using US standards or US technology. It's very much a European project. But the fact that they've got that base to build on has made it easier. So, yeah, I think, you know, by the summer, by the end of the year, there'll be protocols that people are starting to use in real building projects, and everybody can sign up as an ally, which doesn't cost anything. Just go to the website, get involved, and there is a webinar on the 30th at 2 o'clock CET for anybody who wants to learn more.
Okay, great. So you all know where to go. Francis, I saw you shaking your head and nodding your head, so I'd be curious to a reaction, the value of that, particularly when it comes to building teams in banks, so from Belfius. And you have these loans specially designed for smart cities, so perhaps you can tell us too the main barriers that you tend to come across when you're looking to fund energy efficiency projects in particular, and how project developers might address those.
Okay, good morning everybody. Maybe the first thing I'd like to say is that since the financial crisis, there is no longer a financial crisis today. Money is available on the financial market, and it's even cheap. So there is no lack of money, it's lack of investments, which there is today. It's maybe one first point I'd like to address to. Secondly, I think as a Belgian bank who is major preferred partner of the public authorities and social institutions in Belgium, we believe that public authorities need to make an example. It's easy to say for politicians, you need to do this, you need to do that, to all kinds of people, inhabitants. If you don't give them the example, you won't be able to convince them. And this is the second approach we do today. A third element is if you do investments, try to combine different domains. do not only do retrofitting of a building, do not only build a new building, do not only put in solar PVs or anything of that kind, but combine different domains, do a mobility project combined with a new building. Because probably if you build a new building, whether it's a new administrative building or another type of building, well, a few years later you will have a bottleneck of mobility. Combine both immediately. Integrate energy efficiency in the concept of the building. We saw it until today. We launched together with the EIB last year in June a 400 million, not billion, I'm sorry, but million envelope for 3 different schemes: urban development, energy efficiency, and mobility projects. Today we have 10 projects which are gained to Belfius and the EIB. We are about 40 million which are already loans which are taken. So there's a taken up from the market quite high from public authorities. When we see new energy buildings, near zero energy buildings are built by public authorities for 1,400 euro per square meter. So if they take it in the concept from the beginning, we see that it can be done at low cost. If they don't take it, if they can't spend the money from the beginning, they do it modularly. We have 2 projects. One is near Antwerp, where they put in building a new building, near zero energy building for assisted living project. It's about 1,400 euro per square meter. And it's not only blocks, it's a quite high living standard. We see another one here not far from Brussels in Bierbeek, which is a new municipal building. They integrated with existing buildings they built a few years ago, a cultural center. Well, they integrate the new building with this one, and they reuse rooms for meetings. One thing. Secondly, they use new heating solutions. So if you take it from the concept in the beginning, we see it can be done. Another issue today for politicians and also for the EU Commission I'd like to address is ESA rules. ESA 2010 rules, we see that this is a barrier today for local authorities. Although local authorities are not implied directly, but they are implied indirectly by these ESA rules which are given to public authorities by the regional governments and the federal governments. We see that there is a lack on investments coming due to ESA rules, which are saying, well, even if you implement energy efficiency solutions, well, we will have a penalty for ESA. So on one side, you say from EU, invest in climate. On the other hand side, you say, well, if you invest, you will have penalties because on the new way of ESA rules. So try to find other solutions than only direct ESA solutions like they implement today. Investments are keys for all local authorities, not only a simple of them. Have a global approach, give the example and communicate. I live in a small town and it's the only solution, only example I give to complete my statement now. I live in a small town for 40,000 inhabitants. They make a lot of investments in energy efficiency, but they don't communicate. They don't communicate with the inhabitants. They don't raise taxes, but they don't communicate why they don't raise taxes. If you want to give the example, you need to communicate also. For project developers, I think a lot of elements are already set here. Solvency, have a good analysis of risks when you go to banks. Give to the banks the certainty that you analyzed all the risks, also for ESCOs. We see there is no taken up in the market in Belgium today for ESCOs. Probably neither in other countries, but not so much in other countries, due to a lot of reasons. We also see that corporates, a lot of private institutions, do say, well, you all know NIMBY, not in my backyard. There is a new acronym, it's called NUMBA, not on my balance. So we see also a lot of corporates who say, well, we like to invest, we like to implement. Public authorities, we don't have the money. Corporates, we don't like to take on our balance. We need to find other solutions, other vehicles who need to have capital, who will lend not cheap money. So I think we're raising more holes than solutions.
Can I ask you, what would you say if you had to pick one thing out of the projects that come your way? What is the biggest failing in very concrete terms that projects coming your way tend to have?
What we see today for the projects for public authorities, when we look to public authorities, majorly they don't look at the complete scope. They only look to one thing. When public authorities sign the Convention of Mayors, or if they have a global plan, well, they will look further than only one project. So I would like to address to public authorities, well, have the global approach, have master plans where you integrate energy efficiency, mobility, etc., from the beginning, from the conceptual.
Yeah.
I think this would be the main issue.
That's very clear. Yeah, Steve, you wanted to come back, and then Miguel, and then we'll come to you, Paula, don't worry.
Yeah, I think what everybody's kind of referring to is about development of projects, isn't it? And you know, I use the expression mind the gap. If you ever travel on the London Underground, you hear mind the gap. Well, there is this huge gap between ideas, as Ralph was saying, and concepts and bankable projects. And how you get from one to the other is about developing a business case and a business plan. And there's a real lack of capacity to do that, particularly with large-scale multi-building projects. As was said earlier, people have done individual projects, and those are great projects, but they're like one-offs, and people aren't developing these multi-building projects with multi-domains. And I think the other thing that makes me think about is, you know, I often say the problem with energy efficiency is it's incredibly boring. And that's like a really hard realization when you've been doing it for so long. What sells energy efficiency more and more, and will sell energy efficiency, is the non-energy benefits, and the work by the IEA and others who've looked at that is really powerful. You know, politicians on the whole aren't motivated by energy efficiency, but increased jobs, creation, environment, better smart cities, all of that stuff is a much better sales thing. So the business case needs to be better, and it needs to have all those things built into it. And then, of course, if you're raising money for a business or a project, you need a business case, but you also need a financing case and a financial plan as well as a business plan. And that should start right at the beginning. And this notion of bankability, and what is bankability, it has lots of dimensions, technical, legal, economic, but it needs to be managed right from the first concept of the project. And people need to think about what they can do during that development of the project to have a better financing plan as well as a better business plan to make it more bankable. It's not something, you don't develop the project and then go to the bank or go to the fund and say, here it is. It doesn't work.
Yeah. We'll come back to you later. I just want to give, well, we'll go via Miguel, and then to Paula.
It's on?
Yeah.
Sí. Yeah. Only 30 seconds. No, the only thing is regarding the number, not on my balance, that's important. In the majority of the cases, we are able to provide off-balance sheet financing through SPVs, through variable payments as a service contract. So we can talk about that later. It's not easy. We are talking to the Big Four auditing companies at the European level, but we have a hell of know-how, but still we need much more. But good point.
Okay. We can come back to that indeed. So we'll try and keep it as focused as possible. Off balance sheet, fine, but we want to try and leave our audience with concrete recommendations as to what they can do to address that. Paula, so from Medio Credito Italiano, a commercial bank, you've been working with the EIB to help propose loans for ESCOs. So perhaps bringing us back to the bigger picture in a way, what is your experience of energy efficiency projects? What do you think project developers can do in everyday terms to make them more bankable? And maybe a word on ESCOs in particular as well.
Okay. We are a commercial bank, but more specifically, we are within the Intesa Sanpaolo Group, which is the first bank in Italy, the corporate finance hub for the group. Since 2011, we designed and implemented an action plan dedicated to energy efficiency investments through widespread solutions, from free pre-audit to enterprises, to zero impact loans, and not on my balance sheet, but quite the same. TPF, third-party financing schemes for ESCOs, which is still a niche, of course, but at the focus of the day. And operating lease, public lease, so-called incostruendo, and financial lease. But we still are facing some critical issues from the demand side, because we still have, right now, a lack of demand. Someone of the panelists said already. Demand is poor, and the International Energy Agency in 2012 was saying about energy efficiency is a huge opportunity, but going unrealized. And just in 2014, energy efficiency, International Energy said, is starting to bring results. Yes, we agree, because players are just now probably achieving and consolidating their business model, and so the market. What public authorities can do? They can stimulate the demand by a widespread general knowledge, by information, promotion, training, by harmonizing the probably too many, I can say in Italy, incentive schemes, and making them more simple. Another issue is aggregation. Yes, we are facing, or we are managing two small sizes of projects for energy efficiency. I give you some piece of information. In Mediocredito Italiano, we usually have an average size of loans around 1 million euro to a maximum of 30 millions or 40 or even over. For energy efficiency, we are making an effort, and we start from 250k euros. But probably still not enough, because energy efficiency projects are even smaller and smaller. And that's an issue. The second one, it's about inconsistent ESCOs profile, because we have a variety of different ESCOs, everybody so-called ESCO, but not everybody really an ESCO. We need standardization even in the technical and economical financial criteria for selection, because we need some ratios between the increase in debt and the turnover, the cash flow of the enterprise. An ESCO is still an enterprise. We need to standardize even the EPC contract models and the processes of the audit methods, the set of documentation, etc. 11352 certification should need to bring these results, but is still not so used and not so detailed under the practical senses. Third and last, the ESCO and third-party financing model is really a capital-intensive model, and it's a game not for everybody. But we can be helpful about this by using the risking and securitization packages. We must act relating to the recurrency of the investments, the increase in debt I mentioned before, and the combination of two steps of risk the risk related to the corporate trend, to the end user, and the risk, the corporate risk of the ESCO itself. You can see it's not so easy to assess, even from a bank perspective, the risk, the level of risk in the portfolio of an ESCO.
What do you have a view on what local authorities could do? Thing we talked about earlier on, to make it easier for ESCO, so to pre-discuss with the bank their financing needs, and therefore then to give the ESCO more of a structure for so that the ESCO can prepare something with a financing structure that is going to fit your requirements.
As I said, this is a play not for everybody, so not every ESCO is adequate to talk with the bank, but for sure this kind of assessment, the bankability assessment, must be done at the very first stage of the process with the public authorities and with the banks. So we have to start at the very first stage we can. For first, and second, public authorities can put the bankability issue inside the call for tender. And this is really useful to put in place the projects, and not just to talk about them.
Okay, so it would mean adapting the call for tender, changing the call for tender.
Make the bank part of the process of the tender.
Yeah. Okay, do we have, let's pick up from there. João, you are looking dubious.
Yeah. Let me try to first understand what you think about, or what you are saying about help from authorities. If I need money to make a project as an ESCO, I deal with the bank. I don't need the authority, the public authority, to help me. It's my risk. I deal with the bank, or I deal with the fund, and I assume the risk of the project. Of course, I need to present a good project. I need to present all the technical and economical evaluations. I need to convince the investment fund or the bank that it's a good project. But at the end, the risk is my risk. If the bank asks for guarantees, it's my guarantee. So I don't see how public authorities can help me dealing with the bank. I asked for the Minister of Economy come with me with the bank because I want to have a loan for a project. It doesn't work in my point of view. Sorry. The public authorities, it's an important role in this process. As it was already mentioned, is given the example. Doing projects, it's in his own buildings, it's in his own installations. Doing projects, making good contracts with ESCOs, and communicate them to the public, to the private sector, in order to understand this kind of solutions. That's okay for now.
So there's nothing that public authorities could do differently to make it easier for you to answer tenders. I mean, the way that they're designed at the moment is as good as it
let me understand better. If it's a relationship between an ESCO and a private company, I don't need the public authority for the business. I think what you are asking is in terms of call for tenders from the authorities.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
In my point of view, today, these call for tenders are not adjusted to this kind of business. They need to be changed. The call for tenders are to present a tender in the scheme that we have today. It's very, very hard in terms of costs. We have to do audits, we have to do studies without any guarantee.
Okay.
It
So
must
there
be
is-
changed.
Okay, so if we're talking, then to clarify, so about a 12 for tender coming from a local authority which wants to do an energy efficiency project, there is more that they could do in terms of studies, audits, that would lower the costs for you then, which would make it easier for you to assess the risk and
No,
talk to the
because
bank.
I don't accept an audit made by the other.
Okay.
So I need to make my own audit to evaluate the solutions. I can receive an audit made by another company and see, okay, it's good. I evaluate my project and my decisions with this work. It doesn't work like this.
Okay, yeah. Steve and Lada.
Okay, so I think if we're talking public authorities, in some schemes that I've seen in Europe and outside Europe, where it's gone to tender, it has gone out on a building by building basis, and that is complicated, and you have a framework where you have 10 or 12 ESCOs looking at some 250,000 euro, dollar, pound project in a building. It's just not worth the effort of tendering or bidding very often. And then also those same schemes have gone out and said, okay, each project needs to be financed separately. Well, that's just crazy because you don't have the scale that we know that we need. So, if you're designing a tender, it has to be multi-building, it has to be with one source of finance right from the beginning and going out individually, which some schemes have done around the world, just doesn't work. It's just too high a cost.
Let me address this issue in respect to what public authority could do. Actually, the feasibility study is a very, very important tool in my opinion. I'm not an engineer, but I mean, what we saw in the public authorities is they've done their procurement, first the procurement to do the consulting, to do this feasibility with a consulting company, which is independent company. Doesn't have anything to do with yourself as an escort, and doesn't have actually has been selected in the normal bidding process. So this is usually very smart engineer guys, as we see them, that are doing that are conducting the study. So the public authorities first select this engineering company to do the study. The second step is actually their value is their value of the importance of the public authority, because these are the ones who have seen then the studies done by this by this private company, and have calculated the savings. So their study, the results of their studies are very crucial to see what payments the public authority is able to do in order to pay your services. I mean, this is like, there is a connection between what are they doing, the stream, the financial flow, or the flow of the financials, from the public authorities, because it's based on savings. So you need them. You couldn't say we could not cooperate. Say the point that Steve has mentioned, I think it's very important. This building by building. I mean, we saw it once in our project. We have one project in portfolio, and we had a huge discussion with the public authorities to say, listen, guys, put 3 buildings, at least 3 buildings in one tender. It's easier for you. No, we want to do it building by building because each of those buildings in separate municipality, okay, but it's in the same region. But we don't want to do it on a... So our influence as a financier is relatively limited in that sense, so we could not impose like the sense of standardization, which I'm, as a former consultant, in great favor of. But if they say they do it this way, then they do it this way. So then another aspect that I want to address is that the thing is with the public authorities, we could not there again, the ones who are selected have to give an advice, again, from the bankers. I would say, I don't know how much you, Paul, is doing this, but we advise at the moment our public authorities, we will work together to go for the larger ESCOs. Experienced ESCOs who know what kind of equipment they need, what kind of installations they will do, what time in the timeline. So what I'm really, really often worried about is about the project timelines, because in some case, if the authority says we want to have project implemented until the next elections, which is a very normal political drive, then I need to ensure that I have an ESCO that has an ability to deliver the project plan within 16 months. And if I have a smaller ESCO, okay, the industry is developing, so we're not saturated, we're not in the saturated market. So they will be coming with experience, there will be coming more ESCOs in the market. But for a time being, I will say we need to stick to the market players who know how to do it and also have the capacities to implement it from the project management perspective.
Okay, Paolo, you wanted to come back, and then I've seen 2 questions already, so we'll get some feedback. Since this is all about you, the conversation, it'd be good to have some of your input.
I agree with Lada, of course, and I think even that the issue we have to keep in mind constantly is that the goal is to realize the projects. And to realize the project, we need the cover by the financing cover to be verified at the very first stage, not at last when the game is done. And in this sense, bankability must be one of the issues in the tender, and not only for the ESCO, but even for the public authorities, because in the common interest to realize the projects, not only a problem of the ESCO, for first. And second, we are talking about building. Building renovation is a priority, for sure, but to reach this goal, probably we have to mix and match the type of projects. We have to put inside projects or typologies with short payback period or in the midterm, so to can realize goals with long-term payback periods like buildings are. And this is a suggestion for the public authorities in their tenders.
Okay, thank you. We can come back maybe to the issue of bundling too, but 2 questions. Yes, the gentleman there, and then we'll go to the front.